Hello, this is Joe with Nerd in Korea, and we are going to start a series on Commander rules and what to play in Commander. Alright, so here we're talking about the basics of the Commander rule format. The next video we will go into more in-depth on color identity. Alright, so let's get started. And it's not. Alright. Okay. Commander is currently the most popular format in Magic. More and more cards are particularly made for the Commander format. A lot of people are kind of not crazy about this, but I think it's kind of inevitable. Like, you know, a company has a very popular product, they're gonna make things for that product. They want people to buy stuff. That is what companies do. That's how companies work. Yeah. So getting mad about it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway. More sets are being made with potential Commander cards. If you look at recent sets in particular, like March of the Machines had a lot of cards that would be very good as commanders. I think there's a major thing that they have been pushing is focusing on particular tactics like keywords and making commanders that can use that very well. I think before a lot of people would try to focus on making like typal or kindred or tribal or whatever you want to call it decks. So like all elves or all dragons or all, you know. And now they're focusing more on the actual kind of mechanics that they use. Like Convoke, for instance. In the, March of the Machine set, they had a Convoke commander. Kalia, I think. But anyway. History, originally called EDH, or Elder Dragon Highlander. Like the movie Highlander, if anyone remembers that. Began using chaff from decks. So chaff, what they mean is the cards that are not used. When you draft, you pick a whole bunch of cards, and then from those cards you build the deck, then there's still left over. So that's the chaff. Created by Adam Stately in Alaska in the late 1990s. In 2006, the Rules Committee was formed. So the Rules Committee is something kind of unique to Commander. It is the Commander Rules Committee, and they have nothing to do with Magic of the Gathering, or like Wizards of the Coast, Magic of the Gathering. Anyway, the Wizards of the Coast. Oh, my brain sucks. And So they are not really beholden to anyone, which I think is a major advantage. They also keep the ban list for Commander very, very small, which is nice as well. Since 2006 they've had that. A Commander is the star of the deck, so we're going to look at some basic rules of Commander. 100 card deck. So usually in a lot of formats you have 60 card decks. This is much bigger at 100. They also have Singleton. The rule is called Singleton. A lot of formats, you have 60 cards and you have a play set. It's called a play set of 4 cards. This you can only have one of each card. And one of each card's specific name. So cards can have different art. That doesn't matter. You ignore the art, just the name of the card. So you do have some cards that do the exact same thing. Like 3 Wishes and Nature's Lore have like the exact same rules text, but they have different names, so you can put both in your deck. Nature's Lore is also way cheaper, which makes no sense to me, but anyway. 4-player free-for-all, last one standing. So basically, again, the Highlander, where you're trying to kill everyone else, there can only be one is the Highlander thing. So you've probably heard that before, even if you haven't seen the movie. See the movie, it's a great movie. Don't see the second one, but see the first one. You start with 40 health versus 20 health in most other formats. So 40 makes a very big difference, right? You're talking double the health. And for some strategies like Spellslinger, if you're trying to use instants and sorceries to kind of keep taking away life, a lot of them might, like Lightning Bolt is pretty high at 3. So even if you take away 3 life and then 1, 2, 3, 3 kind of thing, like when you're starting with 40, that doesn't make a big difference, right? That's not a lot. 20, you could drain them pretty fast. And the last one, Commander Damage. We're actually going to talk more about that later. But if one specific commander does 21 damage to an opponent, that opponent is out of the game. They lose the game. So it is kind of like not toxic. Toxic has this poison counters. Basically, it's like poison counters, but you get 21 of them, and only one infect. That's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, it's like infect, but for only one specific thing in your deck. So that's something to consider. There is a thing called Voltron strategy, where you make your commander as strong as possible so they can start like one-shotting people. So there are a lot of decks built around this kind of like win con. Alright, so advantages of Commander. First of all, it is non-rotating. So things like Standard, whenever a new set comes out, it pushes out the old set basically, right? So there's like maybe 5 or 6 sets available in Standard at a time, and when a new set comes in, an old set goes out. So if you build a deck, that deck is good for like a limited time. You have to take cards out of it pretty frequently. So I think it's something like 2 years. Every 2 years, you're going to have to start like with a whole new deck, basically. Also, people are critical of that because a lot of times, you get something that is really, really good, like one specific deck that just kind of like dominates. Whereas in Commander, it's because there is a wide synergy availability. You can choose from any set, so you can make almost any mechanic work with it. I think it's much better. And budget friendly. It is more budget friendly because you can choose anything, right? Anything from any set. There's no real limitation there. You don't need the brand new shiny card. You can use anything from the last 30 years of Magic. You can choose whatever, Again, it is currently the most popular format. More and more cards are made particularly for the Commander format. More sets are being made with potential Commander cards. So March of the Machines, again, very, very popular there. That had a lot of commanders that I think, like Kali of the Vast, where the Convoke mechanic was the focus of that one. So, yeah. Before, I think a lot of commanders were focused on kind of like Typo or Kindred or Tribal or whatever you want to call it. Whereas like the creature type, you'd have like all elves or all wizards or all, vampires, whatever. And that would be kind of the focus of the deck. That's still a good thing to do, I think. But now, yeah, they're more focused on the different kind of mechanics that they introduce into the game, like Convoke. I actually built a Convoke deck I really like, and so, yeah, with the Kali of the Vast, I believe it's called. So anyway, the Commander must be a legendary creature, first of all. Exceptions, so again, sometimes you can have 2, and sometimes they can be things other than legendary creature. So, one thing, a lot of Planeswalkers, it specifically says this can be your commander. But also, Partner, Friends Forever, these allow you to have 2 commanders and kind of combine them as you wish. Background, this is a lot like Partner, except it has an enchantment as one of the things instead of a creature. Again, I already said Planeswalkers and dual face cards, cards that have 2 sides, right? You can use those as commanders. I'm actually going to talk more about that in a bit. Color identity defines which colors you may have in a deck. I'm actually going to do my next video on color identity because that is kind of like confusing in a lot of ways. So I think that needs its own video. Command zone, a special zone just for the commander of the deck. Okay. So here we've got the zones. I guess I'm going to move this a little bit. These are the normal zones. Again, land and is on the battlefield. So that's one thing that's kind of misleading. But you have your life total, mana pool, I guess. Library, graveyard, and exile. So those are usually the battlefield, library, graveyard, exile. And the only one not on here really is your hand, right? The cards in your hand is the one zone as well. And here we go. The command zone. The commander is always available at the start of the game in the command zone. So you start the game with 7 cards like normal, but you also have the commander. So it's kind of like you start with 8 cards really. And can always be returned to the command zone when entering another zone. So this is very important, especially with like exile, right? If someone exiles your commander and it's just gone from the game, well, that's a big problem, right? With this though, anytime it changes zones, you can return to the command zone. So if it dies, you can put it in the graveyard if you want to, or you can put it in the command zone. So that is kind of the save. Again, there's a downside to returning to the command zone too many times, but we're going to get to commander attacks in a second. Okay, and so this is more what the zones look like in a game of Commander. There is the battlefield and lands. Again, lands are on the battlefield. I wish it wouldn't show it that way. But then there's exile out of the game, basically. There's the library, the graveyard, and your hand. The cards in your hand is one zone. So there are cards that will say, oh, return this to the person's hand, or return a creature to the person's hand. They can do that to your commander. I would just put it into my hand and then play it again, because even it's cheaper than going from the command zone again. So, but you could return to the command zone if you wanted to. Again, that probably would be a bad idea because it's just more expensive, but who knows. Okay, and my computer's not working right. Hey, fun. Get in my circle of protection here. Alright, commander attacks. I've kind of referenced this already. Every time a commander returns to the command zone, it costs 2 more colors to pay to get it out again. So let's say your commander costs 3 of whatever converted mana cost, right? If it goes back to the command zone, if it gets killed, you return it back to the command zone because you don't want it stuck in the graveyard. Then it costs 5. If it dies again, you return to the command zone. Casting again costs 7, and then 9, and then 11. So you don't want to keep casting your commander over and over and over because it gets very, very expensive very quickly, obviously. If your commander dies or is put into exile, it's your choice whether to return it to the command zone or not. Some commanders may benefit from being in the graveyard. So if we look here at Kroxa, this is, I have this card. I really like this one. When Kroxa enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. So escape is basically, it's in the graveyard and you exile things from your graveyard to put this back out. So it's a commander that really requires, if you want it on the battlefield, it has to go to the graveyard first, right? So there are a lot of, commanders that do maybe even require going to the graveyard. Again, they can go to the graveyard if you let them. It's your choice whether to put it in the command zone or to the graveyard. So having a commander like this that actually can benefit from going to the graveyard is not a bad idea. Remember, someone can exile your graveyard as well, but if they do, and your commander's there, that would be changing zones again, right? So it'd be going from the graveyard to exile, and when it does that, you can return to the command zone. So there's no real way to get your commander out of the game, but it makes it more expensive. Alright, color identity. Your deck may contain only colors in your commander's color identity. This means color symbols in their casting costs and other symbols listed in the rules text box. For instance, Cheddarfang is green and black. That's called Golgari. Alright, so here we've got the green for his casting cost, and then in his text box there's a black, right? A skull, black, showing, so he has, I actually have this as a commander. I really like him, and we're going to use him as an example later. Okay, commander damage. So if a commander deals 21 damage to any player, that player loses the game immediately, right? So this is a win con unique to commander, and it's built into all of them. I played with people one particular person that was against commander damage and said, oh, no, we don't play with commander damage. And I was like, well, I do. Yeah. I think if you're not planning to use it, it's nice to remove it from the game. But in general, it does kind of like, just because you start with 40 life, and there's so many but it does kind of ways to stretch a game out. For instance, lifelink decks. If you have a lifelink deck, you can end up with having like hundreds of life and just be almost impossible to kill, right? This really balances the game out. I would not skip this at all. But anyway, damage from different commanders does not stack for this. It does have to be 21 damage from one commander. Again, you do count it, keep counting it. So like, let's say a commander does 7 damage to me, and then the next turn 7 more, and the next turn 7 more. I lose, right? 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 21, I'm out. If other commanders damage me for 7, that doesn't matter. You count them up separately. You don't count up all commander damage in a big pile, right? So one commander has to do 21 damage, not all commanders, all right? And healing does not remove commander damage. Again, you count it throughout the game, just like infect or poison counters. You do not, excuse me, you do not get to just heal it and make it go away. So, yeah. Building your own commander deck. So, things to think about. We are actually going to make more videos on this later, but anyway. Is try to think of potential cards in 2 ways. Synergy or flexibility, right? With every commander, you definitely want to consider like, how do I help the commander do what they're good at? And how do I make up for what the commander's missing? So yeah. So we're going to look at Cheddarfang one more time. Questions to ask yourself when building a deck. How are you going to deal with threats from your opponents? So remember, your opponents are going to have creatures, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, instants, sorceries. And in this, you have 3 opponents, so you'll probably see some of all of those, right? It'd be very unusual to have a whole game with 3 opponents and no one uses artifacts, right? Like, it's not very likely, so you should have something in your deck to deal with all of those things. What does your commander need? So what are the synergy cards? like token generators. For Cheddarfang, he needs to create tokens, right? So lots and lots of tokens. What is your commander bad at? Right? What is your commander missing or lacking? No commander is going to be able to do absolutely everything. Okay? If they could, it would be just annoying. It would be pretty cheap, I think. Flexibility cards here. Cheddarfang can only kill creatures, right? So I actually have a Cheddarfang deck. That's one of the things where it's like, okay, I need something to kill artifacts, enchantments, and, deal with instant sorceries, planeswalkers, right? He's very good at dealing with creatures. Creatures are a major threat. It's a good thing to be ready for, but it's not the only thing. And finally, color identity. It's a more complicated issue to discuss. It's a rule that we're actually going to go over more in the next video. If you look at this Kenrith, where I already briefly discussed, he's a WUBRG, and that means all colors, right? White, blue, green, red, black. WUBRG. I guess that they're not in that order, but anyway, yeah. Black, red, green for WUBRG, but anyway, yeah, alright. So in the next video, we are going to discuss color identity in much more detail, because this is something that a lot of people, I think, get confused about, and you really need to know. If you are building your own deck, you need to really understand this well. So anyway, alright, I will see you guys next